All right, I
Okay.
will
I get the
share
slides.
my screen if I can get there.
Okay. Good morning. So we are gathering today for learning convening around building powerful strategies. My name is Amy Force. For those of you, most of you know me. I'm a collaborative consultant for the Jackson Collaborative Network, joined by my esteemed colleague, Sarah.
Very esteemed. Good morning. My name is Sarah Williams, and I am also a Jackson Collaborative Network consultant. And Amy and I work together to do this work, both the universal offerings and the targeted offerings.
All right. Do we want to just take a minute and unmute yourselves and do a quick introduction? Maybe your name and organization.
Yeah, I'll go. Hi, good morning. My name is Abby Davis. I am the Teen Pregnancy Prevention Initiative Coordinator at the Jackson County Health Department.
Good morning, Abby.
I can go. I'm Janelle Buchler, whole child consultant at the Jackson County ISD.
Good
I
morning.
can go next. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle White, Director of Health Education and Health Promotion at the Health Department.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Aaron L. Massey. I am the RN team lead with McLaren Health Plan.
Morning, Aaron.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Harmon. I'm the Supervisor of Sports Medicine for Henry Ford Allegiance Health.
Good morning, Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Monica Moser, and I work at the Jackson Community Foundation.
Good morning. We also have a little note. Oh, before I assume that we've gotten everyone, I shouldn't assume
A
that.
couple more folks. Anyone else on the line that wants to introduce themselves?
Hi, good morning. This is Margaret Brown. I'm the Director for Integrated Case Management at Allegiance.
Good morning. This
Margaret. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, this is Cheryl Price, Concord High School Principal.
Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
Margaret, I'm just going to let you know your audio is a little bit low. Okay, so welcome everyone. If anyone joins us, feel free. I'm actually going to ask you to type your name and email into the chat box. That's a good way for us to be able to follow up after the convening. We'll be sending you the slides, recording of the convening, and any of the tools that we talked about in today's convening. Feel free to type in the chat questions also that you have along the way. Sarah and I will both be watching the chat to address any of those. We also want to make sure this is interactive. So if we're talking about something, you're welcome to put your hand up, raise a hand either on the screen or type into the chat. I have a question on this. We'll try to make sure that we're hearing you. Feel free. We'll ask you to mute yourself during, when we're talking, but unmute at any point and just say, that's an interesting thing. I have a comment. We want to make sure that we're hearing your voices as well. That's kind of the whole point. So we will jump into this. Is there any other housekeeping? Yeah, feel free to turn your cameras on or off, whichever you're comfortable with. But I do love seeing your beautiful faces. I miss interactions with people, and I miss seeing folks out and about. So thank you for being here. All right, let's move on. So here's the action planning process. Those of you who have joined us in the past should be very familiar with this. And this is, we've been building through and kind of walking through in our learning convenings many of these steps. Top step is looking at analyzing the data. So that's kind of the first step of the process. That's where there's an issue with your organization or with your policies or practices. You kind of see that something's skewed, and then you take that data, kind of dig deeper, and we've talked about disaggregating the data, making sure that you're getting the right information and identifying inequities with that data. So this data might be surveys, things that you've heard from frontline staff. It could be surveys that you've done in the community. We did a whole learning community around authentic engagement to really be hearing what's going on in the community, and then disaggregating that data to get a better understanding of what the root causes are. So we're hearing lots of things from community members, and then kind of going through it, disaggregating it, and find out where there are disparities. On the right-hand side, you'll see inequitable policies, deeper dive, authentic engagement as a tool in making sense of the data. All of those are convenings that we've done in the past. We would love for you or welcome you to go to our YouTube channel, which is linked at the bottom of this slide, and you can kind of go through the process. So we started out about looking at the data, identifying inequitable policies, authentic engagement, and making sense of the data. So in all of that building up, we are now to the point where if we've done all this work, we would be able to design powerful strategies. So that's what we're going to talk about today. You may or may not be here in the process. You may have really kind of just gathered the data at this point, may have more steps to go through. Sarah and I can help you identify where you're at and what you're doing, and then we will make sure that we kind of get you to the place where you need to be before you're building these strategies.
Also, I wanted to just interject too, like, so the YouTube channel is great to like catch up on previous convenings if you so desire. There's also a lot of resources that I'm trying to think, even if you didn't attend previous convenings, that are listed both like in on the info hub. Is that the right term? Like under announcements, like the action planning work guide. So just like people learn differently, and like maybe you actually want to like learn about authentic engagement as a tool, but you don't want to watch 90 minutes of Amy and I talking about it. There are tools and we have lots of resources and links. And as a reminder, like we have some that the network provided and also some that like other members have like found valuable, et cetera. So just know that like we have a lot of links and resources, and the YouTube channel is one of them. And then also today, like you will also leave with like very specific tools and links related to today's topic of the powerful strategies.
Yes, the info hub is a plethora of information. And it has the guide, the action planning guide, which a lot of this information is pulled from. It's an 11, 12-page guide, but it'll walk you through every step. And as I said, Sarah and I can you know, if you're like, okay, here's what I've got and here's where I'm at, we'll catch up to where you need to be in order to get to this point. So designing powerful strategies. This is a step that, like I said, has a lot of background before you get to this point. When we talk about strategies, in its basic form, strategy is just a plan of action designed to achieve an overall aim. So often folks will jump to building strategies before doing all of the deep, powerful work that comes up to it. And they'll just say, okay, maybe let's try this to address this. And that way you're kind of just throwing stuff in the air and it may not be a powerful strategy. What researchers have found is that the most powerful system change strategies are ones that actually shift mindsets, policies, and practices that are contributing to the problem. So strategies that focus on program design, although programs are really important, or ones that build awareness or access, those are critical pieces to what we do in our community, but those are not ones that are actually going to be system change strategies. So we really want to make sure that in all of the conversations we're having today, the focus is really looking at building strategies that are shifting mindsets, policies, and practices. And most often we've actually looked at the bottom piece where we're building awareness and this, you know, and those are important things. Like we have a lot of programmatic things that are important to distribute in our community. But the focus is going to be on shifting mindsets, policies, and practices that are actually contributing to the root cause problem. We'll talk a little bit more. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think also, I mean, I think we will also get into it a little bit later too, but I think it's easy as well to, when you're thinking about designing powerful strategies, especially as like, I'm an educated person in this like field and realm, and I actually know what's best for this thing. And so it's kind of easy to, I feel like a lot of strategies or plans have been like grandfathered in, or I don't know. So I have been a part of them, like those groups, and I've witnessed it. And so I think it would be helpful to like, I don't know, kind of keep that in mind, or have that in our mind as we talk more about strategies.
Okay, so this is what we call the ladder, and it's kind of addresses system leverage points. So in our system, there are a lot of leverage points that we make and touch points at different areas. So this kind of gives a visual. One of my favorite things to talk about how things are more powerful and less powerful when we're looking at system change. So level 4 is what we talk about, and this has been researched, and folks that have done system change have noted this. But I just want to make note that all 4 levels are important pieces in our community. But if you'll look at that level 4, those elements, which are really kind of program design, what kind of quality programs do we have, the range of programs, are they accessible, resources, do the programs have skills and knowledge? Those are all the least powerful. Now, that's not to say that they're not very important, because certainly a lot of the programs that we have are immediate fixes to issues in our community. So we do have to have programs that get folks things like food and personal need items and things like that. Those are very important pieces of the system, but they're not going to do long-term system level changes. Level 3 is really looking at interactions. So we've got a lot of programs out there, and we're giving to the community. Are we getting feedback back from the users of those things? So that's really like making sure that we're putting something out in the community, and are we getting responses for them? Are they helping to do design and that kind of thing? Level 2 is really about structure. So we're climbing that ladder to more powerful system changes. And power is a really important thing, how decisions are made, who participates in that decision-making process, who's involved in that. And then regulations, which we've talked about so often in a lot of these convenings, about policies and practices, incentives, rules. What are the barriers that folks are encountering on a day-to-day basis that affects long-term success? Connections, that relationships to people. We talk about that so often when we talk about authentic engagement, and are we understanding the problems? And then connection between organizations and subsystems. So those are building to more powerful leverage points. And then the top is really about mindsets and goals. So these are the things that are often the most difficult to change. Mindsets, as we all know, I mean, when all the work that we do in our community, they're really difficult to change mindsets. But once we change mindsets, that's going to build more sustainable long-term change in our community. So really having identifying the goals of our community, a shared agenda, and then looking at mindsets, attitudes, and beliefs. So that's kind of the level. As I said, all 4 are important. When you start at level 4, we throw a program out there. The really ultimate goal is to build that program into something that gets really feedback loops. And then once you get community input and feedback loops, you're building into how are these decisions made. So you're really kind of climbing the ladder. All 4 pieces are important. We will have things in our community that are all 4 levels, but the goal is to really climb up to the point where we're changing the attitudes and beliefs in our community that allow, that break down barriers and allow for more equitable practices and policies. So that, go ahead, that was a lot.
No, I just wanted to, we've had a lot of conversations around this ladder as we were preparing for today. And one of them I thought was really interesting. We've talked a lot about like how much resources go into level 4 programs, and how many efforts go into it. Excuse me, sorry. I swear it's allergies. But in the piece around, not that programs are easy, but they're easier, right? Like easier to measure, easier to say we did this thing. They're easier to grasp and understand. And when you get up to like structure and paradigms, it's pretty messy and like heavy and muddy and complicated. It's not easy to measure systems change. It's not easy to measure, did we change mindsets? And so I think it's a lot. It's overwhelming. Sometimes it's like there are a lot of, I have experienced like political things or relationship things that like when you go up the ladder and try to make those big changes up at level 1 and 2, it's not cut and dry, and it's not easy. So I don't know. I just think that is something to acknowledge. And we also talked this week when we were talking with Sherry, and we were talking about in an ideal world, you have all of these things in place, right? So like level 1, you have someone bought in to the program. You have someone bought in and the structure is great. And then all of the programs are rolling out well, right? So that if you have turnover and if you have different things, like your programs aren't hinged on a person. They're not, I don't know. I'm probably not saying that well, but like you have it, if you have people up at the top that don't have mindsets that support level 4, it's not going to be sustainable, and it's not going to be something that continues in a long way. My
No,
words are meh,
no,
you know?
Sarah, that was a really good point. And I think too, when we're looking at resources and funding and money, all of the money gets poured into level 4 because it's easy to write a grant. It's easy to say, here's my administrator, here's the things I'm going to do. These are my outcomes. I'm going to reach, 200 people. And funders are very eager to say that it's all written out, it's all lined up, and it makes sense, and there's a budget, and there's a number of people reached. And so that's often where we pour our resources into level 4. And as I said, those are kind of important factors too. But the level 1 and 2, although they're the cheapest things, but they're the most difficult things. I mean, to change someone's mindsets and to be making shifts on the way we think and the way we design our system it doesn't cost any money. But you're looking at power, and you're looking at those folks high up in our community, and you're looking at how are decisions made, who's making those decisions. So although we're going to try to shift, and the way we should be working is more at level 1s and 2s. But like Sarah said, it's messy. But we want to hear from you. Let's flip on to the next slide, because we want to have you guys jump in and chime in. So we're going to try to annotate today. At the top of your screen, you will find a bar that it says, should say, you pull down on the, is it options? And you'll see annotate where that blue arrow pulls to. So if you pull down and then click on annotate, it'll bring a bar across the top of your screen. I mean, you should be able to see like a star. So we're gonna ask you to think
I think
about
it says stamp first.
Stamp,
So like annotate
first.
and then stamp.
And then you can check star or check mark. We can have a whole plethora of different stamps on here. But what we're gonna ask you to do is, Sarah, if you'll flip to the next screen, stamp on the ladder where you thinking in your organization or in the work that you've done in the community. Let's take a stamp and put where you think the majority of the strategies that you've built to address issues or problems in the community. Where do you think the strategy typically fell? This is anonymous, so stamp away, but let's pop down some ideas of where you feel like the strategy work that you've done in the community has typically fallen. I love that we've got diversity in our stamps.
And obviously we can have more than one. And I'm assuming that some of these stamps could come from one person, right? Like you're not going to just have maybe level 4, maybe you've had more than one.
Okay, that's that's awesome. A lot of the strategy work, and I think that we've progressed in our community very much so over the last few years. So it looks like a lot of them are looking at policies and practice, incentives and rules, so regulations that are in place. We've got a lot of folks that are looking at how decisions are made, who's making those decisions, who's participating in those decisions. And we've definitely got recently some work, we're looking at mindsets, looking at attitudes and beliefs. And then we've got some folks at level 4 too. And those, like I said, the work needs to be done at level 4. We need to make sure that there's food distribution in our community, and we need to make sure that there's access and there's things. Who would like to take a minute to feel free to unmute yourself, take a minute and explain where you think your community is in the strategy work that they've done, and maybe a little bit about why? So if you put your stamp down, let's hear what led you to that decision, or what you think about where you put your stamp.
I could jump in here.
Oh, you go, Janelle. You go.
I would just say schools historically like to focus on level 4, and they still like to focus on level 4. And it's always about what's the quickest fix we can possibly get, or the magic bullets that's going to solve all the world's problems, or the latest problem of the day. And so historically, we put lots of resources and energy into elements. I think we're getting better at thinking about systems, but the biggest struggle, and thus the reason it is the hardest thing to do, is to shift mindsets. And so although I'd like to say we're a lot further ahead in the level 1 area, I don't feel like we're as far ahead, you know, and I get that system change takes a long time. So one thing I would just note too, though, is in looking at all the stamps, I find it fascinating that the least stamps were at feedback loops where, and, oh, the power one, that, what I think about is the fact that we're not getting voice from people who are impacted by problems, and people who are impacted by issues are not invited to the table to make decisions. So I just thought that was really interesting.
That is very interesting. Go back and watch our community engagement one. We really focus on that.
Yeah, I was the one that put the heart by the power, and we've been practicing. We're just starting addressing that. Most recently, we did a grant round that was around tackling systemic racism, and we knew we wanted community voice, and so we were able to. We had almost 600 people look at the 18 proposals that were submitted and help us prioritize them. And that prioritization was the way that we presented it to our grant committee, and they really followed the community's recommendations. Even when the most highest voted on from the community was the lowest voted on by my grant committee, and they still funded it.
Wow.
They took the community voice. And so shifting that power, and that was just, and it wasn't perfect. We wish we could have, you know, been in person and had people give feedback and that kind of stuff. And we used a survey, which isn't great, but it was really interesting to watch them struggle with, nope, the community said this, even though we might not see what the community sees. We have to trust that the community's voice is important. So it's really cool.
That's awesome.
That's really neat. You know, Monica, you describing that, this was not in our our learning convening notes, but I listened to a podcast this week that talked about the benefit of like not even necessarily making perfect decisions, but making better decisions, and how, and it was so great in like personal and professional life, but like the value in honoring and acknowledging that, like, yes, right, we have work to do, etc., but actually this thing that we did is actually better, and then the next time we can be better, and then like whoever takes over from me, they can actually do better. Like it was so, I don't know, it was so inspiring and refreshing to me, and like, I don't know, your comment reminded me of that.
Yeah, there's somebody, and I don't know who said it, but somebody famous said, don't let perfect get in the way of progress. And that has always stuck with me. Like it wasn't perfect, and COVID made us change the way we thought we would do it, but is better than it would have been if we hadn't done that. So yeah, thank you for that.
Well, and having participated in that, Monica, I thought it was the most amazing thing. Honestly, I felt like, oh my gosh, like real people get to make decisions about what is funded. I just thought it was amazing. I loved it. So thank you for doing that.
I did too, and I thought it was so great. Yeah, it was so great to hear community, what the community's like efforts are. Like, because it really raised awareness. As much as I work on this on a daily basis, it was fascinating to see some of their ideas for solutions to some of the community problems. So that was really cool. Like, oh, that, you know, they're building this program and they're thinking about this, and wow, I guess those kind of supports are necessary too. So it was really cool.
Yeah.
And how neat that, like, your example, Monica, of right, like this thing, and I know we had discussed while you were doing the grant process, like this is how we do things, and here's the process we have done things, and the grant committee is used to this thing, and the one that the community voted on the largest was the one, and honoring that, right? Like to me, it's like, well, this feels weird, and I'm not sure about it, but like there's such, that like gave me goosebumps to think that like, I'm not sure how I feel about a thing. It's really not what I was trained to believe in. I'm not sure I endorse it, but I believe, and I am willing to be a part of shifting power. Like that's, I will not swear today because I'm being recorded and we're professional, but I want to swear and just say, that's amazing. I don't know. I just think that's cool. Like leaning into the unknown and the discomfort. I don't know.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say about it is it was amazing, and it was also very hard. It took a lot of conversation to to tee it up, to make sure that everybody on the committee knew that we were framing it that way and that we weren't going to have sought the community's input and not use it. And so like, but it took a lot of time to talk that through and make sure everybody was on the same page. So that whole mindset, they got into that mindset. It's like there were some deeply held beliefs that we know best, even though we're not the people experiencing the problem. And, you know, so yes, we did it. And yes, it was hard.
And to now have that sort of model or practice replicated, right? Like, so how can we do that again? How can that not be the, remember that one time we did the grant with the cool engagement, right? Like,
yeah,
that should be the way we move forward. I want to hear too from other folks on the call where they put their stamp on why they and what they thought about that. Who else would like to share about where they placed their stamp and why?
Amy, this is Michelle. I can just kind of piggyback a little bit on what Janelle was saying, but just from my lens of health education and the grants that I have in my area, it seems like so many of the programmatic ones, more federal, that come down to the state, are focused on the elements. It's all about your evidence-based program and your numbers, and just it's this, I don't want to say cookie cutter, because they can make a difference and they do, but still, even before COVID, it's just you pick this program and you have to do it just like a school-based program, basically. I feel like personally the local grants are more in the level 2. Our community has gotten to benefit from the last few years, and that's, you know, due to like the Community Foundation, the United Way, some of the local systems in place. That's just my 2 cents, is the difference of the funding source.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as you know, being in health education in the past, that was just, it was easier to fund the programs, but the programs were only good as the people that ran them. And the program was like a 3-year program or a 1-year. I mean, you know, we saw those grants come through and we had a 2-year cycle and a 3-year cycle. They weren't sustainable and they were as good as the people that you had in place to do them. But yeah, and they're good. Like, I know a lot of good work comes from the programs that we do with that. And that's not to belittle those, because those are, you know, like I said, people need to get fed. People need to have, you know, health education, you know, programs or different things in our community. So they're valuable. They're just not sustainable, and we keep kind of rotating through people and funding and things like that. So, but if we could, you know, move it all more toward level 1, we would be like, we wouldn't have as much need for as many programs if we shifted mindsets and if we shifted the way we're practicing in our organizations.
Do you think, coming from an outside Jackson lens, like myself, that's been, so Michelle, to your point of like many of the funding or the grants are at level 2, but they haven't always been, right? Like that's progress, because I know that obviously there's been years of collaborative work together. And that's pretty impressive to think that a local effort and local fundings would be, you know, more focused on structure, but that I would imagine that has been progress along the way.
Definitely, and a lot of it's been from the work of the HIO, and which is now the collaborative network, of course, but just reflecting back on even the last 7 to 8 years and the change that we've seen locally, it was the ABLE change training, the first one and then the second one. And of course, there's pieces of that right here on the slide, but that was definitely took our community to a different level. So reflecting back, that training and those pieces, and then the system scan and all of that we've done, that was a huge change for many of the action teams locally, and then the sources. And here we are with still those same areas. So it hit the nail on the head for our community, and it was what we needed.
That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, does that, before we move on, is there anyone else that wants to jump in on that? Okay, we will have another opportunity to jump into, because we love hearing your voices. You guys have great insight. So, Well,
What we didn't talk about is how to clear your stamps.
oh yeah, don't forget to hit the little red X on the right-hand side of that strip. Otherwise, you'll be stamping all the way through the.
Oh, but first, yeah, so can you clear everyone's then,
Yes, maybe.
please?
Okay,
Nice.
you're welcome.
So we will move now. So this is just a quick overview, strategy building steps. These are, we'll cover these a little bit more as we travel together today. But the steps are brainstorming strategy ideas, sorting and labeling groups of strategy ideas, prioritizing the clusters, the groups, finalizing strategies, prototyping, and documenting. So please keep in mind our time together today is very short, in that in the real world, of course, you would never attempt to do this in a matter of hours, but we're hoping that this is a synopsis and that we can provide tools for you to access later, or if you have questions, we're happy to follow up with you after the call. And also we've talked about if there's a desire or need to dive in deeper into different steps, we can also have maybe different convenings later in the future. So the first step we have here is around brainstorming, and I'm going to hide the faces. So yeah, so during this part of the process, it's so funny too, because as we were talking about this, so much of the ideas and activities are like, while you're in person together in a group around a table, get sticky notes. And we're like, well, we can't. So we have been we have to be creative in thinking about how to engage people and how to collect data and do all these things virtually. But this part did talk about group members using sticky notes to write down ideas. And these are around this is around strategies. So if you're following along the action planning process and you already have a problem statement and you've already gathered data and you've already looked at the data to assess what it means, then the brainstorming of well, what can we do to specifically address this problem? And we wanted to also note, encourage group members to apply an equity lens as they develop ideas. Will their idea improve system conditions for the target population? And really, as we have mentioned in every convening, there really should be authentic engagement in every step, right, as we go around. So there shouldn't be, I'm trying to think, and not to I know Michelle is here, but I love so much when you were a part of one of our convenings and you talked about how your idea for a strategy to address awareness about teen pregnancy prevention services, you actually asked young people what would be a good strategy, and used authentic engagement in every step. So I think that's important to note, and to, again, own that most of us are not the ones directly affected or most affected by the problem statement, and that we're engaging those people when we're thinking about strategies. And yeah, I know we have a note here as well, talking about, as you have these piles of statements and you have themes that stick together, maybe going back and referencing those, the statements that community members have made, to really think about their words and their thoughts as we're brainstorming strategies together. Amy, feel free to jump in, of course.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered a lot of it. Yeah, I think when looking at brainstorming at this section, if you've done the work up to this point in the past convenings, we've talked about when you've done system scans, when you've reached out and gotten authentic engagement from the community and you've themed that, and we talked about theming in the last convening, where we feel these are all about this particular thing. So if you're brainstorming a strategy related to that, go back and say, does this address all of the things that they said? Because although they might have been categorized as this group of things, you have to just keep referencing what the individuals said and who said them. That's really important to make sure that the who and the what are kind of all reflected when you're brainstorming. Okay,
That's
going back.
great. So we have a unmute or type in the chat. So we thought here it might be a good opportunity to maybe connect or give an example of, we said a problem, which we were like, oh dear, we should clarify that word, or like root cause, theme, issue in your organization or the community that you are currently looking to build strategies to address. So assuming that, and maybe not that everyone has to like be currently working, excuse me, like on a thing, but is there an example of a problem or a root cause, theme, or in your organization or the community that you are hoping to build strategies, or maybe you've started, or maybe you're almost there? Like, feel free to unmute or type in the chat.
We prefer on mute because we love to hear from people. A lot of work going on around here.
Well, and I know I'm trying, oh, go ahead, Monica.
Well, I feel like I'm talking too much, so I was gonna wait for someone else to talk, but you know, we're currently looking at, again, like we have these population level things. We're not working directly with people, but with organizations. So maybe it's maybe, I'm sure it's a lot easier for us to tackle some problem, and I'm the CEO, so I get to make recommendations and my board will follow it. So that, you know, I have a lot of privilege and power that is helping us move to figuring these things out. But you know, we're currently working on how do we align our shared measures system, that's the meeting that I have to go to at 11, with our grant making, and how do we, and all these things you're talking about, the able change framework and all these things, how do we embed it in the way that we do our work? And so it's kind of a big problem, but it's really cool to work on.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
So Aaron had mentioned in the chat too that he's really working on racial disparities in healthcare in general, but also have a program focusing on preventing low birth weight deliveries with a focus on racial disparate populations. So that that's another thing that, and that that's complex.
And I know we've talked about this before too, right? But like the importance of, I shouldn't assume, but I would imagine that if Aaron is working on those strategies and there has been data that's collected to show, right, like this population experiences this thing more often than this population, and like, oh, so then what do we do to help remedy that disparity, right? I don't know, Aaron, if you want to unmute, or if
Absolutely. Yep, you've pretty much hit it right on the head there.
That's great. Have you, your group thought about strategies already? You said you're working on them right now.
Yeah, you know, we're really trying to focus on some of the factors that cause the low birth weight deliveries, like substance abuse, tobacco abuse, previous low birth weight deliveries, those sorts of things. So, you know, what we're trying to do is tailor our interventions to better assist those populations. But like you say, it's hard. It's not easy to identify necessarily the root causes of those things, and so it's tricky. It's tricky trying to locate the focus of where this all starts, so to speak, so that we know how to best attack it.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Aaron. And I think you bring up a good point, right? Because I feel like there are probably interventions that would, I'll like just make something up, like support moms better when they blah, 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 or some, right? But like the true issue, to your point of like, well, why is this happening though, right? Like, so, but why is there this disparity around around low birth weight and which moms are being impacted more. And so it's like the latter, right? So if you think of level 4 in the programs that are probably, there are probably evidence-based programs that address this issue, you know, but like getting the structures in place and changing the mindsets and like the beliefs around it and like the root cause, right? Like, well, why is this? But why is it happening, right? Like, that is the messier part. I love that. Excuse me. It sounds like you're thinking about that all.
We're trying to look at it from a global standpoint.
Yeah, baby steps in that regards. So often we'll build a strategy that says, oh, they were missing their 6-week postpartum visit, so let's make reminder calls. And while that's helpful in the short term, it's not hitting the root causes. So yeah. Abby also shared that she's working on racial disparities that exist in regards to high school teen pregnancy rates for African American teens in the city of Jackson. And
That's
I
great.
love
Oh,
that.
go ahead, Amy.
No, just that the strategies that we're talking about really all call out the disparities, because that's such an important piece of it. And I love that folks are really identifying that it's not just teen pregnancy, or it's not just low, low birth weight babies, but folks have really done the work to like look at the data and identify disparities.
Amy and Sarah, I can give you a big one. Increasing confidence in the vaccine.
Oh gosh.
We're getting, my whole life is consumed by that. And if you see my phone, it's because it's kind of crazy. We're getting the vaccine Monday and Tuesday. I'm personally getting the shot Wednesday. All of our employees are supposed to get it on Wednesday, and we start community clinics the week between the holidays. So,
wow.
And we're talk about a mindset thing.
Target,
Wow.
oh yeah, Target, we're getting ready to do a huge media campaign starting as soon as possible, and all kinds of strategies to reach elderly and African American populations, because just the mindset of trusting the vaccine and just increasing community confidence. And we got to, this is going to be our whole world for the next 4 to 5 months working on that. But really, we're going to be starting community clinics probably like the 28th, 29th December.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Michelle, though, like, so I'll just call out some things that you said because I know, well, so you said increase community confidence. So that means there's a reason that you think that needs to happen, right? Like, so there's some sort of mixed confidence about the vaccine, correct?
Distrust or just,
skepticism, yeah.
Yes, perfect word. Yes. And you can see it everywhere you look on social media or talking to people. It's what everyone's talking about right now.
And the fact that, I mean, and you kind of mentioned it, and I also know that like for Black folks, their trust in the healthcare system is much lower than white folks for a lot of reasons, right? Like we could go back, but I saw data as well that showed like their desire to get the vaccine much lower than for white folks, right? So I don't know, just like thinking about the data points and like, okay, so like how do we get a campaign to them quickly, but then also like, well, why? Or like, I don't know, just when we get to like the root cause things of like the big pick, the mindsets, right? All of it, like how can we help build trust too?
Oh, our conversations yesterday internally at the end of the day, we had our big call about this. It's just like, how did our community vote? How do we reach people based on that? You know, who are the local talk show people? What are people listening to? You know, just political mindsets, everything. We had to talk about it all yesterday.
That's great. I mean, not great, you know, but
it's
like,
very difficult. It's great, but difficult.
Good luck with that.
You want to help?
Well, I mean, my plate might be full, but kind of, yeah. Like, no, but like I think that's so great that you, when you're having conversations, you're talking about all of it, right? Because it's not just about like, let's put a flyer up in like Black populated neighborhoods. It's not just that, right? It's like, okay, to your point of like, how did our people vote? and why, and like, oh my gosh, we have work to do here and also all the rungs, right?
But that's such the important work. So when you're building a strategy and how to like build trust, you're looking deeper, right? You're saying, what are folks saying and why are they saying that?
Yeah.
You're boiling back and you're digging back down. So if Black and brown folks have mistrust in the healthcare system, why? Instead of just, like Sarah said, throwing up a bulletin, where's the mistrust coming from, and what's deeper than that we need to address in our media campaign? What is it that people, in hearing from them, where's the mistrust and why, and how can we, what do they suggest might help remedy that? So yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, and I wonder how are trusted voices being included in that thinking around the media campaign? Like,
Right.
it
Who's
always
at the
takes me
table?
to the resident and action group, honestly, on Wednesday nights, when every week we talk about these sorts of issues. And then I go back to my organization, who is not truly connecting with the voices of the consumer. And I wonder if, like with the media campaign, is it done and ready to go, or have the voices of those who are being most impacted been at the table to develop the campaign or to test it out, or to just a
Or to
question?
say how
And
to, yeah.
we're no further ahead. I'm just saying, I think that's the piece we often leave out. We're so quick to get the strategy. We know this needs to be done. We're going to get this out, but we don't even stop to say, well, what exactly why do you think people are so distrusting in your neighborhood, your community, or whatever? So
What's causing the distrust?
just a
And then,
thought, wondering.
and even the way you disseminate the information, ask them how they best get their information, right? So, reach out to some of those groups that, might be not heard as much, and say, how do you want to hear it? What's the best way to let our population know, or to ease comfort? Yeah, great thoughts.
I know, like even throughout COVID, getting information out about COVID to the Black community, some of the grassroots organizations like YPOP and Partial to Girls and those groups have been so instrumental in getting information and resources out to people, because they're daily, all day long, in communication and interaction with people in the community. So I just think about all the work that we're doing, whether it's in education, health, whatever. How much are we moving on the ladder to really thinking about mindsets and shifting mindsets and those things? Or are we still, it's so much more comfortable to just, I'm speaking for Janelle here. It's so much more comfortable for me to sit and be like, well, I think that I'm just going to design this flyer and get it ready, get it out to all of my building principals, and they're just going to get it. Did I stop to even think what parents might need on in information or things like that? So
I think it's also important to acknowledge that a situation like this is kind of highlighting the lack of relationship between the community that's trying to be reached and then the organization.
Yes.
And in acknowledging that it takes time to heal that distrust and to build a trusting relationship between institutions and the Black community, because it's not like all of a sudden we're going to decide that this population, this is good for them, we have to convince them. It's what has happened in the span of time before this that has shown that we can trust that this is a message that we can receive and is good for us. Like, how have your day-to-day actions and what happens outside of this situation, how does that show care and concern for that community, if that makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah. It can't be just like, yeah.
So much of that, Abby. I'm so glad you said that too. And all of us, Janelle too, this point around like, do our people want to get that messy, right? And I there's this weird leaning in that like feels, we also have to like, does everyone actually want to admit that, like, do people, I don't even think all leaders, people know the level of distrust between the Black community and healthcare, or Black community and white people in power, right? Like there's a piece that's like hasn't even been acknowledged yet. And I feel like before the healing can even happen, there has to be an acknowledgement and like a leaning into the level one rung, like, oh my gosh, I I didn't even realize this. Oh my gosh, well, how do we start there, right? And it's just messy, and it makes people who are very high in leadership like at risk, right? Maybe of not appearing that they have everything together, or I don't know. It definitely, it shakes things up.
If I could just add, I have to go here in a second, but just to kind of even close up the conversation about what I was saying about the media campaign and COVID. And so right now we have to focus on the elderly. So, and of course we have money that has to be spent by the end of December. You know how that goes. But then really the African American group, that's going to take months. Okay. So I just want to say that, but I'll just be real. So there were 8 or 9 of us. We have our incident command system, and we talk for about an hour and a half, multiple times a week. So this is at the end of the day yesterday, and they were talking about the next media that will start in January and how do we build trust in the African American community. But it's like the people, I'm so blessed to be part of this work and on this team, because I was just like, okay, well, and I started talking a mile a minute about all the things that you guys are saying. And we don't need to be the messengers. It needs to be like the trusted advisors, and we need to get on Maisha's show. And of course, the Blazer is also working with us, but it's like, can we get a time scheduled? Can we even schedule an hour and a half with the trusted advisors with us so that they can educate the people that they are in the community with every day? Because the message is not going to come from us. And everybody on our call was like, can you type that up, Michelle? Because we weren't keeping up with what you were saying. And it's like, so I need to do that today because I was talking about a minute, but it's like, I'm so honored to be part of this work, because otherwise we would miss so much of the trust and the relationships. And we do not need to be the messengers as all white people behind the scenes. You know what I mean? So
Probably shouldn't be,
go in a minute.
Right.
I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh my
you,
goodness.
everyone, for
Janelle, I
sharing.
see you're unmuted. Did you want to pipe in, or are you just good?
Okay.
Okay.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, just checking.
Um,
Thanks, Monica. Good to see you.
okay.
Oh
So
my goodness. Well, we could be here all day.
we could. So let's shift a little bit, Sarah. And we were going to break out. We were going to try and break out and do like a practice brainstorming. We'll hold that slide. But I think we're going to probably bypass that and then move back into it, because we've lost a little time, which I'm thrilled that we did, because it was really valuable conversation. And you've got, it's just, so I think we'll skip the Padlet breakout. Sarah, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. We'll just go.
Because I want to make sure we move through the
That's
process.
probably a good idea.
Yeah. So.
But just some things to keep in. I mean, we've talked about this because we've had such rich conversation around brainstorming ideas and things, but keeping in mind the ladder that we've referenced so often. Obviously, we will include this in links to you, and it will be, that's ABLE, right, Amy? The ladder itself?
Yeah.
From ABLE Change. But just keeping that in mind when you're thinking about brainstorming, like, is it feasible? Keeping in mind our influence and control, like, do you even have power to do this change? Does the idea address the targeted inequity? Is it actionable? Will it engage stakeholders? And possibly addressing multiple root causes. So when you're thinking about different strategies, it might address a strategy or address a problem statement about the inequities between certain moms accessing care, but also, like, after looking at it, it addresses this root cause. So like the just thinking creatively about brainstorming. We'll skip over here and move right to here. Is this good, Amy?
Yep, that's great.
Okay.
So once you've broken out, we talked a little bit about Post-its and putting your strategy, each strategy idea on a Post-it. You want to then look at sorting and labeling those groups of strategies. So you've got this either in Padlet, which is a platform that you can use to kind of brainstorm online. There's a lot of different platforms in a lot of different ways, but this is one of many ways that you can do it. Everyone writes their strategy ideas. So you've got your root cause problem, your problem statement. And everyone says, how about we try this? How about we do this? What about doing this? What about reaching out like this? You have to make sure that in that, once they're all on the board, you try to categorize them. So you're looking at them like, okay, these 3 seem like they might be about policies. These 4 over here seem like they might be about resources or funding issues in our community. So if you're looking at trying to make sure that e-learning is available to underserved populations, you're going to have all kinds of ideas on how to address that, and then you try to group them. You're looking at, first of all, was there anything that we missed once you get back together and look at a full board? And then, yeah, kind of pulling them out. Depending on what strategy you're working on, there might be different types of labeling. You could label them by things like the able change characteristics or resources, things like that. Or it could just be like, these all seem like they feel like staff training, so you're going to group them all to ideas and then label them. And you're going to hopefully have a DURS group. You're going to have different perspectives at the table, and folks will come up with a name. And it could look like this. So if you flip to the next one, so the left-hand side is everyone just kind of throwing out the ideas. There's no wrong answer. You gotta, when you put it up there, when folks put it up there, recommend that they kind of explain the why. Why I think this. What's behind that? Because sometimes when someone writes an idea, it doesn't always express the thought behind the idea. So they might be able to expand on that. And then on the right-hand side, you'd start to kind of pull them in. So purple might be about resources. Pink might be about staff training. Yellow might be about funding. Obviously, they won't all be color coded, but they would be grouped similar to that. So that's just kind of sorting and labeling them. And then when you've got those clusters kind of pulled together, what you want to do is, so if you've got one on staff training and one on funding and one, the different labeled things, you want to look at, does one of these tackle more than one root cause? So if you've got a bunch of root cause themes that talk about, say 3 of them talk about the staff aren't this, the staff did this, the staff billed me wrong, or what. If 3 of them talk about staff and you've got one, a cluster that's related to staff training, that might be the one that you tackle first because it hits more than one root cause. And then look at, are they necessary and are they feasible? Like, is this something like, well, we're never going to change the Fed's stance on whether or not we get funding at a local level? And is it desirable? And then the last thing we want to do is, well, the strategies motivate stakeholders to engage in the action. So if you've got a strategy that you're looking at building and you think you're going to get so much resistance, or you think that it is, positions won't engage in this type of a strategy work, and those are the folks that you really need to affect change with, then you're not going to want to push it forward. It might be a very powerful strategy, but you have to, are folks going to get on board with you? That's why we talked earlier about, it's so important to have those people at the table when you're brainstorming the strategies, because if they're part of the brainstorm, they'll likely be brainstorming strategies that they'll get on board with, and then they'll take that out to the community.
I did want to just throw in too, like we did skip over, we were going to do an activity with Padlet, which I totally stole from Janelle's meeting I attended, and she did a great engaging activity that it really replicated like a sticky note board. So I don't know if any of you have used it before or are familiar with it. I'm also happy to, we can include like a link. I don't think I can share it if I am, because anyway, I just thought it might be helpful to like show an idea of a tool to be able to do this virtually. Amy, do you think that we could show it really quickly? Oops.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see if I'm able to new share. Oh yeah, so let me try this. So this is an example of Padlet, and we put up an example. Obviously this is a pretend problem statement. Students don't have what they need to achieve their full potential in learning. But this, I have like a free account, and people are able to, like, everyone is able to kind of double click and think about different ways and different brainstorming strategies around, you know, different things, that ideas. And I just thought it was a great way to kind of virtually bring people together. It is anonymous, so if like Abby were to type in a thing, I would not know what Abby had written unless, you know, she came out and said, this was my idea. So anyway, I just wanted to throw out this Padlet idea, which I totally appreciate Janelle using in a previous meeting. And I just think it's a great way to engage people virtually. And I think it kind of mimics that sticky note, brainstorming, who has ideas, and also encouraging the different ladder rungs, right? So like, we need to find funding as like, you know, like a funding policy thing, or maybe someone's like, actually, we need laptops. And like, that would definitely be like, you know, a programming thing. And so like moving things and kind of grouping them, like Amy was saying, being able to group ideas together and like, why are we grouping these together? But just in this virtual world, I thought this was a really helpful tool in a lot of ways. And had we not had a great, rich discussion today,
we would have been able to practice it.
Done more of this, but
no, I'm glad you introduced it though. Yeah,
just
because
so you all know. Yeah.
We do kind of get stuck in our virtual world, like, well, we can't meet as our group and we can't do this brainstorming, and we can still throw it out to a group of individuals and do the brainstorming. The cool thing too, Sarah, I don't know if you mentioned that once all of these ideas, we would recommend, it is anonymous, but we would recommend folks call themselves out when they put a strategy idea on there, because like I said earlier, there's often more to the strategy than we originally write. And it's important to defend the strategy as to the why, because you know, you don't want to throw pie in the sky out there if you don't really believe in it. And then there's that opportunity to rate. You'll see that little rate button, and you can go from you know,
like, oh, I think this is that's a horrible idea, you know.
You really want to prioritize once you've grouped them. And I have not dug into Padlet very well, but you would want to pull them into clusters before you rated them, because although one idea might not be one that's related to that, might be very powerful. So yeah, we would encourage you.
It's just a good way to have conversation too.
Yeah.
Like, not that you have to give something 4 stars, but it would be like, Sarah, why do you feel that that one would have 4 stars, right? It's just an opportunity to have conversation around it too. So
yeah,
sorry, not to take a lot of time, but
no,
I did
I'm
think
so
it was
glad
a great
you introduced it, because I love the tool.
and
I panicked a little bit about timing. So, but I do
No,
love the tool, and I think
your panic is valid. All right, let's see if I can get back. Let's see how fancy I am. PowerPoint slideshow. That sounds promising.
Okay, so we are going to do a poll. So given the ladder, right, when we looked at the ladder and the level 1, 2, 3, and 4, let's take a look at, so this is a pretend statement, but it's actually not, but our example is students don't have what they need to complete online learning. So if we were looking at the leverage ladder, looking at what's most powerful and what's least powerful, how would you vote as to what would be the most powerful strategy that you would be addressing? So strategy 1 is related to change in negative perception about low-income students and how they'd rather play Xbox than learn in school. A strategy related to a superintendent and its policy on truancy related to online learning. Or would you pick a strategy related to providing loaner iPad to low-income students? Now, we're not asking which one would you want to address or but which would be most powerful? And I am not finding my poll. So we might just have a discussion on it, because for some reason it's not coming up. Sarah, do you have the ability? Click on polls, see if that's.
I can't, hold on. Oops, that's not right. Excuse me. Let me try. And I can't do anything. It's not wanting me. Oh wait, hold on.
Okay, well, let's just have a discussion.
So, or they can put it in chat.
Yeah, type into the chat 1, 2, or 3. Which strategy do you feel like would be more powerful? Although, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the ladder, if my memory serves me correct, because I don't have it in front of me.
Sarah,
the most.
Flip back one.
Oh yeah. Okay, this will probably answer my question.
There. Well, it's little there, but
it is little there.
The most power. Okay. Got it.
Oh, Abby brings up a good point.
Okay. All right. Can we go back to the slide now?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Should have been a poll, but somehow it didn't come out. Okay, so folks had a chance to throw in what they're thinking. Now it's not anonymous, so I won't make everyone call it out. Cheryl, that's a really good thought. Getting loaner iPads to low-income students. Janelle, Abby thought maybe one related to changing a negative perception. We have another vote for number 3. Okay. So thank you all for chiming in with the votes. So yeah, it is.
Can I chime in with a comment as well?
You sure
Amy?
can. Absolutely.
This is Cheryl again. So the reason I chose 3 was the way that the statement, they don't have what they need to complete online learning. So in an education format, we would want to address most directly and most efficiently the stated problem. So let's get them access to online learning. So out of those 3, but I don't know, do they have internet connection? Giving them an iPad without internet connection isn't going to do any good either. So it is a very complex thing to address. And the reason I didn't state a problem earlier is I don't quite know how to state the problem in a way that wouldn't have taken a dissertation to do, but changing the culture, not changing the culture, changing the understanding and recognition of the multiple cultures in a high school. I don't care, pick high school X, it doesn't make any difference. Put any group of humans together, you're going to have a multiple layering of cultures, whether it's racial or gender or whatever. So I think the most important thing that I can do as an educator, and the thing that I am most struggling with right now, is addressing what cultures are we missing within my tiny little building, and how is that hampering the educational success of the people within the culture that isn't recognized, and what are we going to do about it? So this whole exercise right here, you really can't get into the way that it is framed, although I understand the way that it's framed, but it's so complex that it stops you in your tracks before you get started. But I'm really excited to work on it. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's the first step. And you're right. The way that this is worded, you would think that number 3 would, it does. That serves its most immediate purpose. So if it's online learning, you would think to go and get them a loaner iPad. But Cheryl, I love the way that you recognized how complex it is. And yes, your challenge can feel overwhelming. But it's not something that, little by little, you can't start to chip away at. So yeah, it is, and I think that's where our community does, right? We have online learning, get them an iPad. I love that you recognize that it's more than that, right? Do they have internet connections? What's going, what's the use of that iPad? Did their little brother take the iPad and take off with it? It's more complicated. So while a strategy built similar to number 3 would seem like it would be an immediate fix, and that's what we tend to do in our community, a strategy like number 1 is really about mindsets, right? So, and even number 2 is about power. So those top 2 strategies, if you give them an iPad, do they have internet things going in their community? Number 2, yeah, you're dealing with power issues. Those are more powerful. But number 1 seems like it's messy, right? There's a perception out there that they'd rather sit around and play Xbox than actually learn in school. And that's actually a completely made up statement. I have to qualify all of these. We just kind of made these up. But if you're tackling that strategy, that there's a negative perception and that you're not going to bother, you're going to get administrators or folks in the community that say, well, don't bother to give them an iPad. They're not going to use it anyway. Or you can give them an iPad, it's probably going to get stolen, or they're going to lose it or drop it. So now you're addressing that top rung. You're addressing what's deeper. What are the deeper issues in their homes or in their environments that you need to address? So that mindset is so much more powerful when you're looking at, you can't stereotype. And if you're stereotyping, then you've got to dig deeper of what's going on in their home. Why don't they have an iPad? Why isn't there internet connection? Why do you not trust them to give them loaner iPads, things like that? Or you give them an iPad and then their superintendent makes and I don't know, so I'm not in the education field, but they get marked absent because they signed in, an hour later, and that's because they didn't have an internet connection. So now they're sitting there and they got an iPad, but they signed in an hour late because the internet didn't work, and so they get marked absent. So then they're at the point where they're going, why bother? I'm not going to use this iPad. I'm going to go back to the Xbox and sit and play with my friends. So it's deep, it's complicated, but when we're building strategies, yes, there is a need for iPads, but hitting that number one and hitting that mindset and really digging deep into what's the real problem here. Not that they, why don't they have internet connection? Why can't they do online learning? Giving them an iPad is not gonna, I always think of the book, if you give them out a cookie, but that's not gonna fix the problem. There's a need for iPads, but let's dig deeper. Let's look at the mindsets. Let's look at, are we not bothering to help because we have negative biases toward a certain population? So why bother? If we address those biases, if we acknowledge that we have them in our community, we're going to be more likely to then find out what's really going on in their world and affecting long systemic change, not just Band-Aids, not just giving them an iPad, things like that. I'm preaching, sorry.
I was going to say, when you're trying to do system change, probably using strategy 3 would be a quick fix, low hanging fruit that you could do to try to get through the moment. But the longer term, more systemic change is going to happen if you can attack number 1, because so I guess it's a both and in my mind.
Yes.
Like, to really, because people and systems are at all different ends of the spectrum. So if you see, obviously, if you saw a student who needed an iPad in order to do online learning, you would want to make sure they had an iPad to be able to do that, while you're also trying
digging
to
deeper,
larger
That's right.
systemic.
Yeah, and that's where we talked about in the ladder. They're all necessary, right? Those programmatic things that we need to feed, folks need services. So yeah, all of them. But if you're looking at the leverage ladder as which most powerful, that number 1 would make you dig deeper into the whys. So but yeah, all of them are necessary.
And I also, Janelle, you said something to the effect of a quick fix for the moment, given the iPad. And I think also sometimes myself guilty, implementing or giving a solution just to say that you did it. Like, I did it. It's done.
Yeah.
And
You got them an iPad.
Yeah, is it effective? Do they have Wi-Fi? Like, do they have everything else? Did we address all the other needs before?
And did we address the root cause? Like, did we just look at the technology issue, but not go deeper into, okay, why don't they have access to, like you said, do they not have internet access? Are they living in poverty and don't have resource access to, what they need or whatever? So, yeah.
I think that another thing that can be addressed too, as is not only with online learning, but all children going through, their education, is the mindset of the parents, because you can flood them with all the services, iPads, internet, and provide everything. But if the parents aren't supportive of their education, whether it be in school or online, that's a huge root cause of the problem. My son has a friend who has all the services he needs. He has all the equipment. He doesn't necessarily have the supportive parents that are pushing it. So while doing online school, he's working more at McDonald's because he thinks that's a priority for him right now. Meanwhile, he has all Fs because he thinks it's great. He can make all this money working at McDonald's as a high schooler right now. And so my son came to me and said, wow, should I get a job? And I'm like, well, first off, we're in a pandemic, so I don't really want you at McDonald's. But second off, you are, we support him. And I'm like, you are doing more for your future right now by taking that time to work hard on online school, because it is different and a little harder because it's not the norm. And he's doing that Jackson County Early College program. I said, so in essence, you're making more money by taking those college classes. Whereas, again, a lot of kids don't have that support from home at all ages and in all socioeconomic classes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a huge one.
That is a huge one. Well, I think the next step would be is, why don't they have the support? What's going on in their homes that the parents aren't able to be supported? Did they not have good mentoring when they were young? Did they not have a two-parent family? Did they not have folks that would be able to support them, a supported person? So yeah, I agree, Suzanne, while that can really inhibit their ability to learn, we have to go that step further and saying what's in that home that is not allowing that. So yeah, there are, you know, a lot of folks in a lot of different environments, but we have to dig why don't they have the support that they need? Or maybe,
Right.
and it's generational, right? It goes back. So if they were not taught to value learning, you know, if his parents weren't, they're not going to do that for that child. But you kind of got to dig deeper. You got to dig back into it and find out. I don't think that parent not supporting is actually the thing. It's a little bit more complex than that, and it's deeper than that. But yes, that there will hit barriers, and that's why we're giving him an iPad, and then he'd rather work at McDonald's. That's why that one is like, let's find out really what's going on in his environment or in his support system that is not going to cause him to have successful learning. So
Right.
thank you for sharing. Okay, we are going to move along because we want to value your time and not go too far over. Sarah, you want to jump in?
I will jump in. Yeah. So just as we think about designing powerful strategies, using SMART language is super helpful. It's a way to make sure that your strategies are specific, being as clear as possible with what you want to achieve, like a very narrow goal. Isn't measurable. What evidence will prove you're making progress? So like trying to be as specific as possible and not vague. Like we want all kids to be successful is like great, but that's actually not a SMART goal. Like we want all 10th grade, you know, I'm trying to think, 10th grade male students to increase their attendance by 4%, right? So you have measurable goal where you can say, oh, we met that. Is it attainable? Like, is this actually possible? Obviously, achieving world peace and fixing the world is a great idea, but setting attainable goals that are actually within reach, considering your sphere of influence and your power, is it making sure it's attainable? Is it relevant? When setting goals, consider whether or not they're relevant. Each of them should align with your values and also long-term goals, and as well as like aligning with maybe network goals or community things, and then time-based. So in order to make sure something is measurable, like there should be a time factor, like within 6 months we should achieve this, or within the next year we would like 4% of 10th grade male students to increase their attendance by 4%, so that you can say, oh, it's very specific, we can measure it, yes, this is doable. And then you know, deciding who is going to do what. But using the SMART language is a good way to kind of rein in and create SMART strategies. As you're finalizing the strategies, it's important to kind of think about like, okay, so if we have a strategy, is it actually going to address the targeted inequity that we identified earlier? Sometimes you're going along in the process and you come up with a thing, and then when you look at the strategy, it's like, oh, actually, maybe this doesn't address it. So if not, how might we refine it to ensure the inequities are addressed? Making sure that the people that are most affected and close to the problem have voice and that they are agreeing with this. Are there others in the community working on a similar strategy? Are there opportunities to partner for greater impact? Especially in Jackson, I know there's so many like collaborative things happening. And then what unintended consequences might emerge if we implement the strategy? Kind of thinking about, thinking ahead on like mitigating the unintended consequences, using an equity lens, making sure I feel like a lot of this can be mitigated if you have those people at the table as you're developing the strategies, so that a bunch of middle-aged white women aren't sitting at a table creating strategies for like poor or, you know, different class, different race, right? Like I'm not going to try and create a strategy for someone who doesn't look like me. Is there anything else on that, Amy?
No, I think you covered it. I think there's one piece in this step though, when we originally themed them. So you've got groups of statements that you heard from the community. This is where you might want to pull out that you've themed them into a particular thing. So where you might want to go back and find out that folks actually said things in their statements that might not be addressed in the strategy. So you build a strategy based on a theme, but this is the step where you got to go back and actually read the statements that individuals said to make sure that it was really more, they use the word trust so often in their statements, and I don't know that we hit on the trust piece when we built our strategy. So that's just one note to go back and make sure that you're hearing the voices and they're reflected in the strategy.
Thank you. So we'll keep in mind, again, we're like really trying to cram a lot of stuff into a short amount of time. So we will be covering this quickly and also providing resources. Happy to have follow-up conversations about this if any of you would like. But an important step in the strategy, in the designing strategies, is the prototyping, and identifying the target population, who is impacted by the strategy your group has identified, when, where, and how your group share and get feedback with this target population, who will be responsible for the activity, and then following the prototyping activity, your group will need to review the feedback received on each strategy idea to determine if adjustments are needed. So we really use like a human-centered design like lens when thinking about this, because again, just coming up with a strategy and kind of throwing it out there misses an important part of prototyping, and also then gathering that important feedback that might result in editing the process. And I really think like we talked about this before, but having a humble view and lens on things, and knowing that if you come up with a strategy and you give it a best effort, knowing that maybe it might need to come back and need edits based on the population and the needs of the target population.
Yeah, and in the end, that will save a lot of time. If you're just throwing spaghetti at a wall and it's not sticking, if you're not throw it out there and test it in small increments to make sure it works before you build a whole thing around it and have to redo, or it's ineffective. So prototyping is a really critical piece. Sorry, go ahead. Okay, and then that last piece is getting into like documenting the strategies. So this goes back to the action planning guide. Yes, baby steps, Abby, I love it. This goes back to the action planning guide. We have this in there, and this is a great way to have all of your problem statements, your inequities, keeping all of those things in mind at the top of your page, and then writing them down. So you go task by task, baby steps of who's responsible for it. Sarah talked about making them smart, so put a timeline on there. Do the activities, but I love the way that this has all of the things on top that keep you focused on your actual problem, on the inequities, things like that. Those are just an example statements in there, but this is in the action planning guide. We will follow up with you after the meeting with this, but it's been a really helpful tool. I know folks in our community have modified it to small extents when they've done it with their organizations, but you can take it back and you can use it how you think. You can add columns with notes, things like that, but it's a really helpful tool to just make sure that you're writing your strategy down and you're holding folks responsible, and that it's actionable, and that there's a timeline, things like that. So, so that we crammed a lot in. I apologize, but I love hearing the authentic conversation that went on. So we've moved through a lot of this process. Often at this point in the process, you bump back to find out a little bit more, or to go back and look at the disaggregated data, things like that. So it's not always cyclical, but you might bump back into, we built this strategy, but I feel like I really need a better understanding of what the root cause is on this. It might be messier than that, but the next step would be to look at really identifying measures. We have our website that talks about shared measurement systems, things like that, but you really want to look at, is it going to move the needle? Is it going to change community conditions moving forward? So move through all this. We will forward all of these on to you. Mark your calendars for, tomorrow we're having a network update at 10 and 3. And you're welcome to join us. We will be talking about what the network's doing, where we're at. The network, meaning the network is actually all of the organizations that are involved, all of the people that are doing great things. But we'll be kind of doing a little update, because I think with the transition of the network and with where we are in our organizations and our living rooms and bedrooms and things like that, it'll just give us a chance to find out where we are. And then in January, we'll be looking at, we'll be reaching out to some network partners to find out a little bit more of how they figured out what was the problem and how they kind of started into the journey. I know that we hear often that folks are like, well, I kind of don't know where to start. And that is a difficult thing. So we'll be kind of sharing some bright spots in our community of how they figured out where to start and kind of where they moved along to. So
also, just as a reminder, don't forget that we will be following this. We will be including in the email a survey monkey that has a post-convening survey, and we use that data to help form our topics and how we present to people. So please make sure to complete that. It is super meaningful for us.
absolutely. Oh, and this is just a reminder that the collaborative community assessment is coming out soon, and we will rely on network partners to support that and encourage folks in your organization to actually answer the call, because if we're not hearing from our community as to what's going on, this is like a real-time chance to find out what's going on today. So encourage your organizations to answer the call, because we really need that information. It's valuable. There's a link at the bottom of this that will give you more information about that. It's also in the info hub, which we'll be following up with you all after. So I know we're like rambling through this, and we will give you all of this information.
It's true.
And
and just a reminder, yeah, our
Go ahead.
website is new-ish. We're still building it. We're working on the discussion board feature right now, kind of like capitalizing on that, but it is up and running and available, and it has lots of different pages and options, and we hope to utilize it even more in the future. And then we'll end with this. Just a thank you, and obviously please follow up with Amy or myself if you have any questions or follow-up or ideas or pushback. We like it all. So
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we're available to anyone. If you've got questions, if you're at any stage of the process, if you need just a tool for this one piece and then you're like, I got it from there, awesome. But we are available to all of the networks. So yeah, feel free to, as time allows, but yeah, feel free to reach out and say, hey, I've done this and this and I'm stuck here. We'll get you through it. All right, with that, we will sign off. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for your great insights, and we will be following up after. If you didn't, put your name and email in the chat if you haven't done so yet, just so we can make sure we can reach you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good to see you and be in conversation with you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you guys. Thank you.